Hey guys, it's Olivia here from Olivia's Catastrophe. Today I'm here to give you my March wrap-up. I'm so excited to give you this wrap-up because in the month of March I read 12 brilliant books and only one of them was less than a 4 or 5 star rating. So that's just a really good reading month and I really enjoyed all the books. I only read one ebook and let's just get right down to talking about the books. Oh, and I forgot to mention that because I did a bit of travelling in the month of March, half of this video is going to be pre-recorded from the middle of March and the other half is going to be at the end of March. Well, not the other half, the last 2 books are at the end of the month, so sorry if I change outfit. Okay, so one of the first books I read was Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. I've been so excited to read this one, was anticipating it like crazy. This one is about a girl called Zelly who lives in this magical fantasy world of Orisha. And her type of people had magic, but magic has been taken away from them and now they are oppressed by their ruler, who is the king. The king has a son and a daughter, as well as some other kids, called Inan and Amari. There's 3 artifacts that can bring magic back to life and they reappear in the kingdom, and Amari steals the scroll, which is one of those artifacts, and she bumps into Kelly while she's on the run, and they start their quest to return magic to Orisha so that the oppressed people can rise and fulfill their magical and normal role in society once again. Me saying that as the plot summarizes it to it's really making it minimal when there's quite a lot to the plot. This was me after finishing this book. Right, so I just finished reading Blood and Bone. Now, if you know anything about me, you know that there's only about 3 books in this world that have made me cry. This book does such a good job of, being just a normal young adult fantasy read where they have to go on a quest to save magic in this wonderful world. But it also deals with oppression, privilege, minority themes so well, as well as the racial issue, and it does this in such a way that I've never seen before, because it's not only dealing with how these things are problematic and how these things should be used, but we're also getting points of view from the oppressed, Zelly herself, and then also those who have privilege like Amari and want to do something about it, and those who have privilege and don't want to do anything about it like Inan. And as well as that, Zelly is not, I'm going to say that I didn't agree with all of her choices. She does bad things. She is angry. And yes, your anger can be wielded to do good, but your anger can also be wielded to do bad. Please, please, please do read the author's note. And then I was crying, and I'll have a full review of this one because it was amazing. 5-star read. Then the next book I read was A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. This was my first Sarah J. Maas book. People probably know the plot better than I do. What happens is it's a Beauty and the Beast kind of retelling. This girl kills a fairy and the fairy drags her into the fairy world because she has to honour the treaty between the humans and the fae. The fae that captures her is the Beast, pretty much. But there's this curse where they all have to wear masks, and there's this unspeakable evil that they won't tell her about. Basically, I just didn't know what to think about this book. I have to admit, for the first half I was pretty bored, and at first I put that down to the book being a boring book, slow-paced. But I have to admit that if you think about the Beauty and the Beast story, the beginning itself is pretty slow-paced. But then you get to the second half of this book, and that's where the unique twist on the Beauty and the Beast tale comes in, and lots of action is suddenly happening, the love story is suddenly more convincing, and the situation at the end, the plot that she has to deal with, was such a mind twist that I don't know if I can forgive the main character for all the choices she made, but I understand why she made them. It was suspenseful, it was tense, the ending was amazing. And towards the end, there is this character called Reese who is introduced. I'm sure a lot of you know him. He was amazing, and as soon as he was introduced, this book became 10 times better than it was in the beginning. Then I read The Dream Thieves by Maggie Stiefvater. This is the sequel to The Raven Boys. I can't tell you about the plot because I don't want to give away any spoilers for book 1, so I'll tell you what book 1 is about. Book 1 follows these 4 Raven Boy kids who go to this school, Gansey, Adam, Ronan and Noah, and they are on this quest to find this mythological Welsh king who has been buried but is apparently still alive, and if you find him he grants you 1 wish. they come across Blue, who is a daughter to a bunch of psychics, and the psychics are going to be helping the kids along this journey, and Blue befriends the Raven Boys and joins them on their quest. However, Blue has also been told that as soon as she kisses her true love, he will die. So the sequel is pretty much just as good as the first book, but it's a little bit more painful. And painful in the fangirl painful, you love it pain kind of way. And that's because the group have gone through some certain trials in the first book which has fractured their group in a way that I've not seen fractured before, and all of them seems to be really fighting their own individual battles and their own individual struggles. As well as that, this book focused a little bit more on Ronan and things that are revealed at the end of book 1. I can't say any more than that, I really don't want to give away spoilers, but this book is just as brilliant and just as mind-blowing as the first one was. Another 5-star read. Yes, people, yes, read this series. Then I also bought and read 4 of those little Penguin modern classics that have been around. When your friends who are on your course, which happens to be English literature, say, let's just go to the bookshop to browse, don't go with them. You will not browse, you will buy books. So the first one I read was Audre Lorde's The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's House. You can tell from this title that it is going to be intense. It's 5 short essays. I really liked Poetry is Not a Luxury, which is about why oppressed people feel the need to write poetry, and although I don't believe that's the end-all and beginning of the reason why you write poetry, I do believe what she says in this, and I really did agree with that. The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's House. I really liked how it addressed that racism is not a black problem. It is the other people's problem. And I just thought she makes some really valid points about racism, about homophobia, and about feminism in all her essays, and I did enjoy reading this one. The next one I read was Letter from Birmingham Jail by Martin Luther King Jr. It was nice to finally read the material. It was great. Basically what I've learned is that Martin Luther King knows how to accept criticism and respond to it in ultimately the best way. But what really stole the show in this little classic for me was the second piece of work they also included in here. There's 2 works, and it is called The 3 Dimensions to a Complete Life. It's a sermon, which means it does have religious undertones, but just ignore that. Whether you're religious or not, read those 3 dimensions, because I fully believe those are the 3 dimensions to life, and the way he explains what they are and how to wield them and how to have a better life because of them is just so relevant. I couldn't agree with it anymore, and my mind was literally blown while reading it, so I highly really recommend it. I actually think that's something that everyone should read. Then I also got the James Baldwin one called Dark Days. I wanted to read something by James Baldwin because Diana in Colour and also Books for Lanes, I believe that's how you call her channel, I'll link those 2 channels below, have both talked about James Baldwin. They both seem to have, you know, either he's done good or he hasn't done good or he's done mixed thoughts about James Baldwin, so I decided to read something of his myself. Dark Days, and there's also another one in this collection, is about racism, and it's very autobiographical when it comes to his thoughts on racism, and I didn't agree with everything that he said, but I didn't disagree with everything that he said, and he makes some very good points, and as well as that you can tell this really comes from a personal place. It comes from his experiences, and I've never been a black person living in America in the racist, very racist time, so I can't really speak for this one and impose my opinions on his viewpoint, because he's been through things that I haven't been through, and I really did enjoy finally reading some of his work. Then the last Penguin modern classic I read was Daydream and Drunkenness of a Young Lady by Clarice Lispector, and while I did enjoy them, I didn't find them on the level of that story that I read before. However, I did think these were very good ones about love, loss, feeling of depression when you know you're missing something in life but you don't quite know what it is, a wistfulness. And I think that's a feeling that a lot of people have. So a lot of people will be able to connect to this book. Her writing style is as beautiful as usual, and I do recommend it. I was a little bit disappointed. Then the next book I read was one for review, and that is Illegal by John Denny, and oh my goodness you guys, I absolutely loved it. I got this book under the wrong impression. I don't know why I got the impression it was fiction when it's non-fiction. It's an autobiography of the author, who is from the US but moved to Ecuador, And then Ecuador is going through a lot of political turmoil and political change. And it's about being an immigrant in a Latin American country when this political change is going on. And throughout his time in Ecuador, he becomes an illegal immigrant in Ecuador. And it was just so interesting. It actually almost reads like fiction. I think he writes it perfectly well. It's not like the most poetic writing ever, but it's this perfect balance between almost prose sounding like and also autobiographically informational and informative. So I got the perfect balance. And I went into it knowing nothing about Ecuadorian politics or history, so it will teach you everything you need to know without you feeling like you need to be taught. And I learned so much, but as well as that, it also delved into topics on privilege, on oppression, on discrimination, and a lot about love and relationships and family and politics, of course. I just learned so much from reading this one. Again, I highly recommend it, even if non-fiction is not your usual genre. You will be able to take something out of this book. I read some more books that I had to read for my course. I read A Question of Power by Bessie Head. This one is set in Africa. It's about this woman who is from South Africa and she moves to another African country called Botswana, autobiographical manner, but this is a fiction book, so it is a fictional story. And in her move, she's talking about adjusting to being in a different culture, this displacement that she's feeling, but at the same time she has a mental illness. So yes, it's set like that, but it's also set in the past, so when mental illness was a bit more taboo and a bit more unaccepted by society. And I thought it was so interesting to see this kind of displacement but within Africa, because lots of people seem to group Africa as a country rather than a continent. They don't understand that if you go from another country in Africa, you are still an outsider to the native people. So it was very interesting to see that set within Africa, because I don't really read much African literature. And I also really appreciated the mental health impact of it. It's very surreal how she takes these characters that she sees in her illusions and in her moments of craziness and episodes, and how they kind of bleed into her real life and affect her situations. It was really, really intense to read this book. The ending made me so happy, which I didn't expect, but the revelations at the end made everything in the book made sense, and it was just made me so happy. So I really did enjoy reading this one. And then we're back to this huge, English looking textbook. I read The Fairy Queen Book 1 by Edmund Spenser. There are 12 books, I believe. It follows this knight called Red Cross who has to go and save Una's parents. They've been captured by a dragon. However, along the way they get tricked by all these fairies and evil beings, and lots of stuff goes down, some grand battles, some fights with your inward self. And it's it's a Renaissance text, and Edmund Spenser has his own way of writing, which is not exactly the present-day English at the time of the Renaissance, not exactly medieval English either. I feel like there's a lot of things you can learn about the developing of self by reading this book. However, as much as I did enjoy the meaning behind it, and I did enjoy the world that he created in the tales, I found it to be long. Very, very unnecessarily long. Like, I wish I could just cut out bits and you would still have the story and it would still make sense, but it would be a little bit less long. I also read Sunflowers in February by Phyllida Shrimpton. I rated this book 5 stars and I absolutely loved it. The best young adult contemporary book that I've read in a long time. So in this book what happens is there's Lily. She's a 15-year-old who is the victim of a hit and run, and she wakes up and she's not in her body anymore. And she's dead, frankly, she's dead. And she's stuck in this half-life where she's not moving on to wherever you go after you're dead, but she's still on Earth, but people can't see her. She's practically a ghost. But her twin brother, Ben, allows her to take control of his body for a little bit so that she can wrap up some loose ties and experience some last-minute things that she wanted to experience before she died. This book was just so good, you guys. It dealt with grief so well, but it didn't ever become overly depressing. It made my heart so warm. By the end of it, I just had this really great feeling. It was so hopeful, and I really can't wait to see what else Phyllida Shrimpton writes, because I'll be definitely there to read it. And it's a romance. There's this main character who's male called London, and he gets this opportunity to go to this very prestigious school even though he's not from a prestigious background. And while he's there, he falls in love with his best friend's girlfriend, which already spells trouble, but there's lots of drinking, drugs, and basically so many other things involved that become a factor in this romance story. And even though this was a romance, you guys, this was just so much more than that. It really is a coming of age book that deals with a lot of important topics that teenagers will come across as they grow up, such as drugs, alcohol, romance, deceit, trust, betrayal, and ambition as well. And I think this book just tied it all together so perfectly. It's an indie author book, but please read this, you guys. I rated it 5 stars. I would rate it 6 stars if I possibly could, and I cannot wait to read more books by Patricia Vanessa. I'm already adding some to my Goodreads TBR. So those are all the books that I read in the month of March. Please let me know in the comment section below what was your favourite read in March, or what you are planning to read in the month of April. And I'll be back around with another video soon. I'm hoping to post 2 videos this week. So yeah, that's all I got to say. Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button if you would like to see more, and don't forget, you guys, to hit that notification bell if you want to be updated every time I have a new video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye!